Michael will give you a couple of
Hey there.
Hey there, Chief, you alright?
Good, good.
So I'm just explaining to everyone that we're going to run through some of the questions that we've put out to put out into the wild over the last couple of weeks. And then we'll open things up to a Q&A and then we'll just hand it over to you for the last 10-15 minutes.
Cool.
So, yeah, let's go this round back. Right, so can you actually see anything useful there?
I see really pixelated people. It's almost like art, like it's pixel art.
So let's try that. Okay, let's start with this then. So the first question we put out is the first question we got back. We said, we all know that Node is tightly coupled with V8, which is owned and driven by Google. So far it's been so good, But is there any risk in the future of Node where Google's goals and actions with V8 will differ from the goals of the Foundation for Node? It seems more relevant now that open governance has been established. So have you got any comments on that?
Yeah. So I don't think that anybody is worried about V8's goals diverging from Node right now. However, I don't think that it really matters because everything is moving in a direction where we're less dependent on V8. So a couple things have already happened. So the Microsoft has a fork that has Chakra as the backend rather than V8. And the changes that they had to make to Node to make that happen were pretty minimal. So we're already sort of working on how we merge that work in and how we more generalize how we bind to V8. So in that case, we would actually, we would have the option of going to a different VM, which is awesome. But that only really solves part of the problem because you still have this issue where the native modules are binding directly to V8 in some way, right? And we get this problem every time that we do a new major release because everybody has to go and update the version of man and it takes forever. And while only like less than 1% of the modules in NPM are native modules, the deep dependency chains of modules mean that around 35% of the modules in NPM actually indirectly do rely on some kind of native module. So that creates a big problem whenever we do a major release, and it also means that the native module ecosystem, which is roughly in aggregate about 35%, are going to be dependent on V8 and won't easily take a shock route. So there's already work happening to try and come up with a more standard C interface for those modules to bind to, rather than directly binding to V8. So that would also get us off our direct dependence on V8. But yeah, I don't think that we're actually that concerned about diverging. It's nice to not be dependent, and there are some other problems that we need to solve anyway. And also, as we found with the browser wars, the best way to make a VM really care about your use case is to make them compete with each other. So as soon as we bind to other VMs, we can have a bunch of benchmarks that show that you're not as good at this as SpiderMonkey. Like, why don't you make this better? And then they'll actually respond. There you go. Next question.
Thanks for that. Okay, so the next question that came in was, many of us are happy for falling in love with a great self-start technology with great personality and community. We use Node for all sorts, from robotics and art projects to home breweries, as well as the serious websites that pay the bills. How is the less enterprise-driven part of the Node community, which has been so key to Node's success, accounted for in the Foundation, i.e., how can we be sure that the future of Node stays accessible to all levels of users and not be driven by a community of suits?
So a couple things about that. One is that the main purpose of the Foundation is to support the project in the community and kind of fill in gaps that aren't being filled. So a lot of that tends to end up being marketing and legal stuff. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically about that in a minute, especially on the legal side. But in a lot of ways, the best way to help the Node community is for money to stay out of it, right? This interesting thing happens in open source communities where the community grows a competency if there's a vacuum or a lack of if there's a need for something and a lack of existing expertise. So people either get attracted to the project because they have that expertise, or people grow that expertise. So because we didn't have a lot of conferences in the early days of Node, we now have this incredibly diverse and amazing set of community-run conferences, right? when io.js started, we didn't have a website, and we grew this amazing website working group that is now taking all that on. As well as, like we have this great evangelism group that does social media and all that kind of stuff. And these are all competencies that the community grew in this vacuum, right? So the best way for the community to support that is to continue to kind of stay out of it and to find, good modes of collaboration and communication between those groups, but not to try and pay people directly to work on it or to try and take it over in any way. Because as soon as you start paying for it, you remove all the incentives for the community to continue that competency. But there are some things that the community is just never going to have a great competency in, right? Like the community is never going to be a lawyer. And it turns out that when you're this big, you need some lawyers around. Node is the fastest growing open source platform in the world right now. It's already seeing really heavy adoption in all of these crazy places. The way that modern kind of patent trolls work is that they will sneak code in a project infancy or in a project that doesn't have lawyers backing it or any kind of IP policy, and they'll wait around until it's successful, until that's distributed, and then they'll start suing the users, right? And so a lot of these home users that are never going to make any money on it and they're never going to be that public about it, they're not targets. But if your homebrewed setup project becomes like really cool and profitable and some brewery is using it for making $1 million, they're going to end up getting sued if we don't have both a policy around this kind of IP protection and actual lawyers to maintain it and to make sure that we're up to date on it. So it's this incredibly boring thing that the community does not want to take on, but that we all really benefit from being there. And we get a lot of additional kind of support and kind of contributors because of that, right? There's like a whole class of contributors that can't work on a project unless this kind of stuff is resolved. And having more people working on core and collaborating with each other, like both more independent contributors like that we've been seeing, especially like through io.js, and also these more dedicated corporate resources. Having everybody work together on the platform really helps and makes it better for everybody's usage. So that's a very long answer, but I hope that kind of resolves some of that.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, next question. So, can you explain the upcoming strategies around the LTS and what kind of release cycles can we expect?
So some of that isn't worked out. We're actually talking about a little bit of that in a meeting that's happening in about 20 minutes. But I can talk about the stuff that is sort of resolved. So the way that it's going to work is that there will be like a new major release of Node. It'll have a new V8 and some other breaking changes. When that new release happens, the older major release will fall into the LTS cycle. And so for some amount of time, I think it's like a year, it'll be really actively released. They'll be cherry picking patches out of the master line really kind of aggressively and doing pretty regular releases of it while it's in that heavy, what we call the supported mode. And then for some amount of time it goes into maintenance mode. So then the bar for patches gets higher, only critical fixes and really bad bugs and stuff like that. And then sometime after that, it goes into legacy, which means that we really only fix critical security vulnerabilities. But even then, we do go back and try to make sure that nobody, no matter how old their version of Node is susceptible to these like terrible security vulnerabilities that we might find. So yeah. But the exact timelines and how we cherry pick everything is still in the air.
Right, so next question. Okay, so this one came in, it's not really a Node question, but do you think the steps the Node community has taken towards open governance and wresting control of the project back to the community can teach us more and serve as a model or example for broader social or political participation in the world around us? And I'm so glad I sent you these questions.
So, I think first, before we start thinking about adapting some of these models to other things, we actually need to make them work in the broader context of open source, not just in our community. And we have been working on that. So, wider participation and more liberal contribution policies are definitely working, and we're trying to evangelize those to different groups. But also this Node, it doesn't always need to be quite as contentious as the Node and io.js split was, but a place where So if a project lacks a particular competency, it's very hard to grow that competency instead of the existing structure, and it may be easier to do some kind of fork. And as long as you leave the door open to merging them later, right? Because when a community is first growing and establishing itself, it's operating within the constraints of the world as it exists at that time, right? So if we look at something like say Python, right? So Python really took off in an era where concurrency didn't really matter too much to them, and so they didn't grow a lot of competency around core for concurrency. But people now do want highly concurrent Python, and they want that to be better. And they have this project called PyPy, which does that, and it's a Python interpreter written in pure Python. And they've really built a community around there that cares about those values. And you can see this future where if they were able to merge together again, they would have the competencies of both of these groups of people back into the project. And I think that actually is a model that can work when like changing the existing culture doesn't work. So I think that's more applicable than we think, and I hope that we can start to think of forks a little bit less like a boxing match and more like a sort of like natural progression of a project, and under the same umbrella of the existing community. But we'll see. And as far as like broader kind of political participation, I think that maybe even more applicable this kind of forking and merging process, because political campaigns tend to get very entrenched in the problem that they were trying to solve at that time. And when the problem shifts, it's very hard for them to shift competencies. With very few exceptions. I mean, there are some exceptions in the political realm, but a lot of times you see these new groups sprouting up. And those groups are so at odds with the existing structures that they never end up merging together and becoming as strong as they could be. But I think that that's a better model. Okay. We're coming on 12 minutes. Let's knock this next one out quick.
All right, so this is the last one that came in. So, okay, this one that's on everybody's mind. So how soon do you think it will be before we can confidently run Node 0.10 in production on the load?
I mean, it depends what you mean by in production. I mean, people are running io.js 2.x in production. People are running o.12 in production. In my opinion, you should take 2.x right now, only because, like, if you're upgrading from o.10, you should take 2.x because there's just more people working on it right now. However, there are more people working on o.12 than there were back in February. So the convergence has actually brought a lot more people into o.12 as well. So if you were done the upgrade to o.12, there's not a huge reason for you to upgrade to 2.x yet, because now there are people maintaining it, there's regular releases. And the difference between them in terms of performance isn't ginormous. So yeah, I think now is probably the right thing. But if you want to wait until it goes into the LTS mode, you'll probably be waiting a couple months for that.
Cool. All right. So look, that's all the questions that were sent in advance. So it's Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for Mikeal while he's on the line? Anybody want to ask any questions? No? Wow. Anybody? Okay. So we're kind of hoping that might spark a few questions, I think. I don't know. So do you have any more general points that you've come across in over the last couple of months you'd like to cover?
Oh wow. It's my head has been so far in the details, it's really hard to pull back and get like a larger view of what's going on. But yeah, we're oh man, there's so much going on right now. I think one thing that has remained constant from io.js to now is that we're trying to get more contributors to core, and we're continuing to refine the policies around that. So I know that it seems like this crazy, difficult thing to be a core contributor and to get code in, but it's actually easier than it's ever been, and there's a lot more of a support structure there for getting those code changes in, and you'll become a committer, very quickly.
So how are you communicating that? How are you onboarding people?
So we have a lot of good documentation now about how to pull down the code, how to make changes and submit them in a way that'll get taken. But also we have a couple of tags in GitHub. So there's, I forgot the name of it. I think it's like easy fix or good first contribution or something. So you can actually go through the issue tracker and find things that would be a really good first commit if you wanted to get into contributing. Once that patch is there, you know, a lot of people more people than ever around to review it and to get it in. Once your patch lands, you will, within a week or two, you'll be nominated to become a committer. And it really, like anybody who gets anything of note in anything more than like just a one-line doc change, really, will get onboarded as a committer. And during that onboarding process, Chris Dickinson will sort of talk to you over a hangout and go over sort of all the policies and really like sort of there's like a lot more hand-holding when you get that commit bit and start reviewing other people's code and getting more engaged. And we're working on, you know, additional kind of mentorship programs both before and after that commit bit gets flipped on, and we're even working on better kind of broader changes. We have not started the outreach efforts though yet. Like we've been trying to make sure that we're not bringing more people into a process that is like a meat grinder, and we're really trying to make sure that when we go and reach out to people to become contributors, that it actually is easier than it's ever been. But also, if your skill set isn't around core, it's even easier to get involved in other aspects of the project. So if you want to get involved in evangelism and speaking, you know, go to the evangelism working group. They maintain Twitter. They do these weekly updates. It's a great way to just get involved in the community. You can run a node school. If you build websites, you can get involved in the website working group. It's a really easy stack to get involved in over there. There's all kinds of stuff to kind of dip your toe in. And if you're more advanced but really don't care about core, you can work on the stream implementation, Readable Stream. All of that stuff has gotten a lot easier to contribute to as it's gone into working groups. You got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question. Mikeal. Right, so go for it.
Hi, Mikeal. It's
Just wait to see that as well. If not, then to the mic.
Can you hear me?
There
we go.
Yeah.
Team here. Obviously, you're talking about the core Node Foundation not having money in it, but what's the relationship going to be with NPM going forward now that they're commercializing? They're looking to kind of grow that as a business, and that's very closely tied to Node as a package manager. So what's the kind of relationship going to be going forward with that?
Right. So what's the relationship between the Foundation and NPM and also the core project? So in terms of collaboration, people who work on NPM day to day are more involved in the core than they were prior. Unless you go back to when Isaac was both running NPM and running the project, that's a different story. But the collaboration there has gotten a lot better, and the communication has gotten a lot better. Also, if you're worried about some kind of crazy corporate takeover at NPM or something like that, now that we distribute the platform and we distribute the version of NPM that most people go with, if there was some situation where we did have to fork the package manager, we're actually in a position to do that now. I don't think that that's going to happen, but we are in a position to do that. Isaac has stated a couple times that he wants to put NPM into a foundation. He's just got he's got a timeline where he wants to get a few things done before he does that. So we're eager to do that, and I'm working hard to make sure that the foundation is a very good place to put more than just the core project, and that it'll be a really good place to put NPM. But yeah, the short answer is that things are better than they've been ever before, and there's a lot of opportunity for them to get even better in the future.
Cool. Does anybody have any other questions? No. All right, okay. After we go.
Hi. How's the merge going?
I think it's broken.
Did you catch that?
I can't really hear anything, and the video looks like an impressionist painting now.
Okay, so the question was, how's the merge going?
That's a funny story. So, the original merge plan was built on the assumption that io.js was going to be increasing its major version really often. because that was the plan that we were under. We were going to take a new V8 really often and just kind of push that out. It turns out that that doesn't really work because it takes so long for the native ecosystem to catch up. So we're now shifting the release policy to be something where we wait a little bit longer and have a longer incubation time when we're testing updates to V8. So the whole plan basically said when we do the next major. So when we do the next major, it went from 6 weeks to possibly 6 months, and nobody wants to wait that long for the convergence to happen. So what's happening now is that we're retargeting that convergence to the io.js master. So James Snell, who's kind of leading that effort, the main thing that's in O.12 that is not in io.js that we really need to converge is this internationalization, this interobject work. So that's coming in and coming over, and we should see a pull request pretty soon to master that brings master in line and converges the code bases and changes all of the io.js references to node.js. And so you should see a node 2.x. I hope that you will see a node 2.x and that we don't. This doesn't drag out until we do a 3.0. But I'm pretty confident that we'll end up doing it before that. But yeah, that's why it's taken longer than we thought, is that we initially targeted it for the next major, and that turned out to not be a good idea once we shifted the release plan.
Brilliant. Does anyone have any more questions? So.
Just to follow up the converting stuff. When we decided to merge into the foundation, both the people working on Node.js and the people working on io.js merged their governance structure. So for like 3 months now, both Node.js and io.js have had the same technical committee running all the process, running the decisions. Node current releases, even O.12, are under this new governance model and under this new contribution model. So the really important part of the convergence, which was converging the committers and the community, actually already happened. It's just the code that we're working on now.
Cool. I guess I've got one question quickly. Something you touched on earlier about, I was talking about how you communicate and onboard and stuff like that. In regard to the mentorship program that was in the Node Forward, is that something that's coming back? And is there a planned launch for that at all? Because that was quite a nice initiative that never really got off the ground,
Right. So the mentorship program in Node Forward is the second or third attempt to do that. So there was one attempt called Knode that had a mentorship program that we were trying to put together. There was another one around Node School, and then there was, the Node Forward one was the third. And all of them have not gotten off the ground and kind of stalled out at the same point. So what we're trying to figure out now is why those stall out at that point and what we can do to kind of get them over the hump. So there's two things that I'm working on. One is happening more immediately, and one is happening longer term. So one that's happening more immediately is that Chris Dickinson and some of the other committers really want to do a better job mentoring core contributors. So this is separate from just mentoring people to learn Node and newcomers, but really getting core contributors off the ground and providing better mentorship effort there. Julian is doing a lot in the kind of mentoring people coming into the contributor path, and Chris is working on mentoring them after they become a committer and making sure that they kind of stick around and that they have all the tools that they need. There's another more lightweight mentorship effort that I'm trying to put together that hopefully gets us over what we had before, which is that it's one click to sign up to be a mentor and one click to sign up to get mentorship, and the commitment's maybe an hour, and all you really do is get people off the ground and establish a relationship. So that you should see an early thread about that pretty soon, within the next couple of weeks. But we're not going to restart up what we were trying to do in the forward mentorship because it stalled out and failed at the place that every prior effort had failed, so it would be kind of silly to start up right again right there.
Cool, fair enough, I'll argue with that. Alright, cool, so let's open this up one last time. Does anyone have any other questions that they'd like to put forward? Okay, so I guess the last thing really on my mind is how do we follow the Node Foundation moving forward? So I know you're doing you obviously have the meetings which you're about to go to, and and they're being broadcast. But have you got where's all this information? Is it like can you share some links or just tell us where it is?
So, I mean, most of what the Foundation is supporting is the project, and you can follow the project in all of the repositories in the GitHub org. So whichever stuff that interests you, you should definitely follow those repositories. Any like big announcements from the Foundation will end up getting announced on the Foundation blog and through Twitter. So pretty easy to follow those in terms of like big announcements. And yeah, I mean that's about it.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Well, let's wrap it up here then, to let you move on, because I know you've got to jump onto another call. So, can we give Mike a big round of applause?